Listen, if you thought the Claressa Shields situation had finally cooled off, you're going to want to pull up a chair for this one, because word just crossed my desk that the Breakfast Club, yes, that Breakfast Club, the one Remy Ma has literally called family for over a decade, just pulled the most jaw-dropping stunt any radio station has ever attempted in broad daylight. They didn't just wade into the Claressa Shields and Mz Shyneka storm. Oh no, sis. They picked a side. They picked a lane. They picked the lane most people didn't think they had the audacity to pick. And what they just did on air is being called, and I quote from 3 separate insiders, the loudest betrayal in urban radio history. Sis, buckle in. This one's a wild ride, because by the time we get to the end of this, you're going to see exactly why Remy Ma's silence right now is louder than any diss track she has ever recorded, and why Claressa Shields might have just burned the last bridge she had left in hip-hop before her August 15th fight even hits the arena. So here's the setup, and stay with me because every single piece matters. Claressa Shields, the boxing queen, the undisputed champ, the woman who has been photographed on the arm of Papoose for what feels like a full presidential term, walked into an interview a few weeks back with Mz Shyneka. And Mz Shyneka, who has been quietly navigating radio hallways and morning show green rooms since the Wendy Williams era, decided she was going to ask the question every single person watching at home had been screaming at their television. How much longer, Claressa Shields, are you planning to be entangled with a married man? How long is this arrangement supposed to run? And Claressa Shields, in the moment, on camera, answered the question. Not warmly, not comfortably, but she answered it. And then she and Mz Shyneka took some pictures, laughed a little, and rolled out. Everything appeared, on the surface, to be squared away. Except it wasn't. Not even close. Because here's the kicker. The second Claressa Shields got behind a phone screen and a live camera, the entire tone shifted. The gloves came off. The champion belt came off. And what followed was one of the messiest, most bizarre, most self-inflicted crash-out live sessions the boxing world has ever seen a female athlete deliver on Instagram. Claressa Shields didn't just respond to the interview. Claressa Shields declared war on Mz Shyneka, on her marriage, on her body, on her past, on her career, and, according to Mz Shyneka herself in a follow-up sit-down with Dennis Byron of Hip Hop Inquirer alongside Nyla SS, Claressa Shields allegedly went a whole lot further behind the scenes. We're talking allegations of a full-blown campaign to interfere with Mz Shyneka's future opportunities. Allegations of Claressa Shields trying to get her blacklisted. Allegations of Claressa Shields reaching out to people in the industry to torpedo her name in rooms she wasn't even standing in. And that, right there, is where the real story begins. Because here comes the Breakfast Club, right on cue. Not the next week. Not 2 weeks later. The very moment Claressa Shields' Crash Out Live went viral across the Shade Room, Neighborhood Talk, Instagram, TikTok, and every hip-hop blog with a working keyboard, the Breakfast Club rolled into the studio and dedicated an entire segment to the situation. Charlemagne the God, Angela Yee, DJ Envy, all 3 of them, sitting behind those microphones, ready to weigh in. And what they said, and more importantly, what they refused to say, has now become the story bigger than the story. Because the way the Breakfast Club moved on that segment, and then again on the follow-up segment they labeled Breakfast Club After Dark, has people all over social media asking the exact same question. What in the world is going on between Claressa Shields, iHeartRadio, and the entire Breakfast Club roster? Are we watching genuine journalism? Are we watching public relations? Or are we watching something that looks a whole lot like a cleanup operation dressed up as commentary? Now, from what's floating around online, and I want to be very clear about how I'm framing this, allegedly, and I stress allegedly, several observers have started calling Claressa Shields' PR handling of this situation Operation Save the Mistress. That's the phrase, that's the language, and no, I did not invent it. It's showing up in comment sections, group chats, and Facebook debate threads across the country. And the reason that phrase is landing is because when you actually sit and watch the Breakfast Club's coverage of the Claressa Shields versus Mz Shyneka situation with a clear head, you don't see 3 seasoned hosts asking the tough questions. You see 3 seasoned hosts building a very careful, very deliberate narrative in which Claressa Shields is the misunderstood party. Mz Shyneka is the one who should have kept the same energy in person, and the actual controversy, a documented, admitted, ongoing relationship with a married man, gets skated around like it's a puddle in the parking lot. Take this to the bank. If any other woman in the industry had walked onto that couch with the same set of receipts against her, the questions would not have been softballs. If Cardi B, if Nicki Minaj, if Megan Thee Stallion, if any of the women the Breakfast Club has been willing to grill over the years had shown up with the exact same allegations attached to her name, the follow-up would have been ruthless. But somehow, when Claressa Shields sits in the interview chair, the room turns into a therapy circle. And that is the observation lighting up every single reaction video, every quote tweet, every reply thread from Atlanta to Brooklyn to Detroit. Alright, so let's rewind, because to really understand what the Breakfast Club just did, you have to understand what Mz Shyneka actually said. In her follow-up interview with Dennis Byron, Mz Shyneka explained the whole timeline. She said, and I'm paraphrasing here to stay on the safe side, that when she left the original sit-down with Claressa Shields, she genuinely believed everything was smoothed over. She thought the conversation had run its course. She said she felt like it was all settled, her word. She rolled out, took her pictures, went home, and moved on. And then, days later, she says she started noticing subliminals. Little indirect shots on Instagram. Little comments in reply threads. Little clips being pushed by accounts adjacent to Claressa Shields' camp. And then, according to Mz Shyneka, the picture got even uglier. She says information started reaching her that Claressa Shields was allegedly trying to interfere with future bookings, allegedly whispering in producers' ears, allegedly running what looked, from where Mz Shyneka was standing, like a coordinated smear. Now here's what the Breakfast Club conveniently did not talk about. That entire backstory. That entire allegation of interference. That entire chain of events that would explain why Mz Shyneka felt she had to do another interview in the first place. Instead, what did the Breakfast Club focus on? A single edited slice of Claressa Shields' Crash Out Live in which Claressa Shields asks, publicly, why Mz Shyneka didn't say all of this to her face during the original conversation. And that clip, that specifically chosen clip, became the entire foundation of the segment. And I need y'all to understand how strategic that framing is. Because when you cut the tape at that specific moment, when you cut the tape and skip the actual backdrop of the Mz Shyneka follow-up, what you're doing is presenting the audience with only half a movie. You're saying to the viewer, look, Mz Shyneka went home and started running her mouth to other people instead of running it to Claressa's face. And the second you frame it that way, the audience automatically shifts against Mz Shyneka, because who does she think she is doing another interview, right? Who does she think she is bringing up private accusations on some other podcast, right? Except that framing completely erases the fact that Mz Shyneka only did that follow-up interview because she says Claressa Shields had already violated the truce first. And here's the kicker. The Breakfast Club knows this. They have to know this. Because this story has been the biggest urban entertainment story of the last 3 weeks. There is no version of Charlemagne the God, Angela Yee, and DJ Envy sitting behind those microphones unaware of the sequence of events. So the omission is not an accident. The omission is a choice. Now, let's talk about Charlemagne, because Charlemagne is the one whose fingerprints are all over this segment. This is the same Charlemagne who, in the same conversation, admitted openly that he has known Mz Shyneka since his early days working alongside Wendy Williams. That's a relationship that runs decades deep. That's a woman he has broken bread with, done radio with, come up in the same room with. And yet, when the moment came to defend her, or at bare minimum, to acknowledge that Mz Shyneka has a track record of being a straight shooter, not a clout chaser, Charlemagne pulled back. He praised the original interview as good radio. He called Mz Shyneka's question the question everyone was thinking. And then, in the very next breath, he pivoted straight into agreeing with Claressa Shields that Mz Shyneka should have said her follow-up thoughts to Claressa Shields' face and not to another interviewer. Take a breath, because this is the pivot point of the entire scandal. Charlemagne, a man who has built his entire brand on being fearless, on being the guy who says the thing nobody else will say, on being the man who once asked Kanye West about his mother on live radio, could not find the courage in that studio to say the single most obvious sentence in the English language. And that sentence is, Claressa Shields is the one who violated the truce first by attacking Mz Shyneka online. So Mz Shyneka going to another platform to defend herself is not just fair, it is necessary. He didn't say it. Angela Yee didn't say it. DJ Envy definitely didn't say it. Instead, what the audience got was a full 10-minute segment in which the framing quietly, delicately, professionally, tipped the entire narrative in Claressa Shields' favor. And that, family, is the story. Because when 3 of the biggest voices in urban radio suddenly all agree that the woman asking the uncomfortable question is the problem, and the woman living the uncomfortable answer is the victim, something is going on in the background that the audience isn't being told. Now, from what's floating around, and again I stress from what's floating around, some corners of the internet have started raising the question of whether there is any kind of paid arrangement between the Claressa Shields camp and iHeartRadio's programming schedule leading up to the August 15th fight. I am not stating that as a fact. I have not seen paperwork. I have not seen contracts. Nobody has. But what I can tell you, plainly and out loud, is that when you watch that segment back with a critical eye, the coverage feels far more like a promotional lead-in to a pay-per-view event than it does like independent commentary. And the second the audience starts sensing that, the credibility damage becomes real. Because here is what the Breakfast Club refuses to say out loud. Papoose is married. Not separated on paper. Not filed. Married. To Remy Ma. A woman whose face, whose voice, whose lyrics, whose entire brand has been intertwined with the Breakfast Club's identity for over a decade. Remy Ma has done more Breakfast Club interviews than most artists can count. Remy Ma has been in that studio for wins, losses, comebacks, and reconciliations. Remy Ma has been Charlemagne's homegirl publicly for years. And now, on the biggest storyline of Papoose's public career, on the biggest personal scandal Remy Ma has faced in the mainstream, the Breakfast Club has chosen to sit on that couch and gently, professionally, side with the woman on the other end of her husband's alleged relationship. Sit with that. Sit with it. Because that is the audacity people online are trying to put into words. Alright, so let's continue, because it gets deeper. During the segment, one of the hosts actually said, out loud, that Mz Shyneka should have had that follow-up conversation face-to-face. And another host chimed in that it could have been a back and forth between the two women. And then a third host softened it further by saying it could have been a girl-to-girl, woman-to-woman moment. And on the surface, that all sounds reasonable. That all sounds like emotionally intelligent radio. But let's put a pin in the surface for a moment and look underneath it. Because when Claressa Shields herself walked into the follow-up storm, she didn't have a woman-to-woman conversation. Claressa Shields opened up an Instagram Live and, in front of hundreds of thousands of viewers, allegedly body-shamed Mz Shyneka, allegedly brought up Mz Shyneka's past marriage, and allegedly floated an accusation that Mz Shyneka had cheated on her ex-husband with a barber. Now, I am not confirming that allegation. I have never seen a receipt for that. I have never heard that story anywhere else. I want to be crystal clear that as far as I am concerned, that claim floated out of Claressa Shields' mouth and into the record with no verification attached to it. But that is the level of ammunition Claressa Shields used against Mz Shyneka. That was not woman-to-woman. That was a public execution attempt. And yet, the Breakfast Club's version of the story is that Mz Shyneka should have grabbed a coffee with Claressa Shields and worked it out privately. Do you see the imbalance? Do you feel it now? Here's the kicker. This isn't the first time Claressa Shields has been accused of turning a professional environment into a personal battlefield. Recently, and this is a story that broke and then quietly got shoved down the trending charts, Claressa Shields was reportedly at a VIP event tied to the Netflix and MVP Promotions promotional circuit, and an incident allegedly took place involving Alicia Bombgardner. The word floating around, from multiple outlets, is that there was a physical altercation. Some reports have gone as far as to allege there was a slap. And in the aftermath of whatever did or did not go down, multiple sources are now reporting that Claressa Shields has been banned from future MVP Promotions events for the foreseeable future. That is not a small consequence. That is not a slap on the wrist. That is a business relationship publicly severed at a time when Claressa Shields is trying to promote the biggest fight of the year. And where was the Breakfast Club on that story? Silent. Or close to it. Now, from what's floating around online, the Whisper Network is saying that the Alicia Bombgardner incident is one of the reasons the promotional weight around the August 15th card has felt so light. Because when you look at the actual undercard, when you look at the actual guest list, when you look at who has publicly signed on to walk Claressa Shields to the ring, the star power just isn't landing where it needed to land. You've got Lotto attached to the ring walk. Lotto, a woman who is also currently in the middle of her own public storyline involving a married man and a newborn child. And even Lotto has been strangely quiet about the walkout. Anyone who has ever watched a major fight promotion knows that when Lotto, or a Cardi, or a Megan, or an Angel Reese signs on to walk out with a fighter, the promotion goes into overdrive. Instagram posts every 12 hours. Tour stops. Cross-promotion. Interview clips. But instead, Lotto has barely publicly mentioned that she's attached to this ring walk at all. And that silence, from a woman whose entire business model is built on visibility, is deafening. Because when Lotto is quiet, it usually means Lotto doesn't want the association bleeding into her own brand. And if Lotto is trying to distance herself from the Claressa Shields ring walk after signing on to it, that tells you everything you need to know about how the Claressa Shields brand is being perceived in the industry right now. Even the very people who agreed to promote her are trying to promote her from 10 feet away. Now let's zoom back out. Because the bigger question in all of this is not whether Claressa Shields deserves the criticism. The bigger question is, why does Claressa Shields keep getting protected while every other woman around her keeps getting hung out to dry? And that is where we get to the part that Remy Ma's fans are furious about. Because for years, the Breakfast Club has positioned themselves as a platform where Remy Ma could bring her wins, bring her losses, bring her real. And Remy Ma has trusted them. Remy Ma has publicly co-signed them. Remy Ma has, on multiple occasions, called out fair reporting when she felt they missed the mark, and they've absorbed those hits like professionals. But this is different. This isn't a missed nuance. This is a full-throated tilt of the narrative against the woman closest to Papoose in the eyes of the law and against the woman asking the obvious question in the eyes of the public. And Remy Ma, if she is watching this, and let's be honest, she is watching every second of this, has to be sitting at home wondering how long these were really her people. Take this to the bank, family. In hip-hop, silence around your friend's public embarrassment is not neutrality. Silence is a side. And right now, the Breakfast Club has picked one. Alright, so let's continue, because the layers keep peeling. One of the more revealing moments from the Breakfast Club segment was when the hosts openly complained that the storyline had swallowed the actual fight. They said, and I'm summarizing to be safe, that everybody's talking about everything around Claressa Shields except the August 15th event. And on paper, that sounds like a legitimate frustration on behalf of a boxer. On paper, that sounds like they're trying to steer the conversation back to sports. But peel it back one layer. Why is the fight not the story? Because the fight itself, when you break it down, is a soft ticket. The opponent doesn't move the needle. The Atlanta market, which usually goes bananas for any hometown-adjacent event, has been strangely lukewarm. The undercard doesn't have the Atlanta legends attached to it that could have supercharged sales. No T.I., no Future, no Outkast reunion moment, no headline-level celebrity walkouts beyond Lotto. And when the fight itself isn't the driver, the drama becomes the driver by default. And now the drama is bad drama. Now the drama is questions about Papoose's marriage, questions about Remy Ma's silence, questions about Alicia Bombgardner, questions about whether the champ is the villain in her own promotional arc. So of course the Claressa Shields camp needs the narrative to flip. Of course the Claressa Shields camp needs to reframe Mz Shyneka as the problem. And of course, if the Claressa Shields camp has any kind of leverage or relationship with major radio outlets, right now is the exact moment they would call in every favor they have. Because the fight goes off on the 15th. And every day between now and then, the story gets one more layer harder to spin. Take this to the bank. This is the moment. This is the exact moment inside every crisis management timeline where the machine kicks into gear. And right now, the machine is on. Here's the kicker. The deeper problem for the Breakfast Club is not even the segment itself. The deeper problem is what the segment has revealed about the broader coverage pattern. Because when you go back and look at how the Breakfast Club has handled Claressa Shields across her recent media run, you start noticing something. She never gets asked the hardest version of the question. Even during the original blow-up moment, when Mz Shyneka asked the mistress question directly, Claressa Shields' answer was more measured than her follow-up crash-out live suggested she actually felt. In person, in the studio, in front of the cameras, Claressa Shields is polished. Claressa Shields is composed. Claressa Shields is on message. But the second she gets behind an Instagram live, the mask drops, and out comes the woman who is willing to publicly disrespect another woman's body, marriage, and career. And the Breakfast Club has never once, on air, pressed her about that gap. Not once. That is a journalistic gap the size of a stadium. And any radio station in America that considers itself the mecca of black culture has an obligation to acknowledge that gap when it becomes this visible. Now, from what's floating around, the Whisper Network is saying, and I want to make sure I flag that phrase because I am not naming any single source here. The Whisper Network is saying that part of the reason the coverage has been this cautious is because Claressa Shields' team has been aggressive behind the scenes about which interviews get greenlit and which ones get killed. And if that whisper turns out to have legs, that alone would explain a lot of the pattern we are watching. But again, I am not stating that as a confirmed fact. I am telling you what is being said inside the group chats and reply threads that pay attention to this stuff. Here's the kicker. Even inside the segment itself, one of the smaller tells slipped through. When the conversation shifted to Lotto walking out Claressa Shields, one of the hosts openly admitted that the Lotto attachment felt like it was placed there behind all of this other BS. Meaning even the panel could see that Lotto was slotted in as damage control, as a distraction, as a shiny object to yank attention away from the mistress storyline. And they still kept going with the segment. They still framed Claressa Shields as the misunderstood party. That admission, that one quiet moment, is the giveaway. They know. They know exactly what they're doing. Now let's talk about Mz Shyneka herself for a beat, because she deserves the reset. Mz Shyneka is not a clout chaser. Mz Shyneka has been in these radio streets, these interview rooms, these entertainment conversations for years. She sat in rooms alongside Wendy Williams before most of the current urban gossip creators had accounts. She has a track record. She has receipts. She has restraint. Mz Shyneka did not go home from the original interview with Claressa Shields and immediately fire off 10 viral posts. Mz Shyneka did not run to another platform to farm outrage. Mz Shyneka left the interview, kept it professional, and only spoke up again after she says Claressa Shields' team started interfering with her career behind the scenes. That is not a woman running her mouth. That is a woman defending her livelihood. And when Mz Shyneka finally did give the follow-up interview, she was asked the natural, obvious question. If you had the chance to speak to Claressa Shields again, or to Papoose, what would you say? That question is journalism 101. That is the follow-up any interviewer with a functioning brain would ask. And Mz Shyneka answered it honestly. She answered it directly. She answered it without dressing it up. And now, the Breakfast Club wants to spin that honest answer into a should-have-said-it-to-her-face narrative. When the entire reason Mz Shyneka is talking on other platforms is because she says the direct route was already sabotaged. That is the manipulation. That is the exact spin. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Alright, let's continue. Because here's the second layer of the audacity, and this one is going to sting for a lot of longtime Remy Ma fans. When Mz Shyneka originally asked the question at the center of all of this, how long Claressa Shields planned to be entangled with a married man, Claressa Shields did not, in that moment, defend the relationship on its merits. Claressa Shields immediately pivoted into a whataboutism argument. Suddenly, the room needed to talk about Remy Ma. Suddenly, Remy Ma has a man too. Suddenly, everyone in the industry should be questioning Remy Ma's private life. And that pivot alone is one of the most revealing moments of the entire storyline, because you don't pivot to attacking your alleged boyfriend's wife unless the direct question has no clean answer. And here's the kicker. Has anyone actually seen Remy Ma publicly with another man? I'll wait. Take your time. Because I have not seen a single receipt, a single photograph, a single tagged Instagram post, a single confirmed sighting. That entire narrative appears to have been floated out of the Claressa Shields camp with zero receipts attached to it. And yet the Breakfast Club, sitting on that same couch, entertained the pivot instead of shutting it down. That right there is where the coverage stops looking like commentary and starts looking like coordination. Now let's talk about the fight for a second, because it deserves a real look. August 15th. Atlanta. Claressa Shields returning to the ring after a promotional run that has been, to be direct, one of the messiest of her career. The ticket movement has been quieter than expected. The undercard doesn't carry the celebrity magnetism the promoters seem to have wanted. Lotto is walking Claressa Shields out, but not promoting it. The Alicia Bombgardner incident is still floating in the background. And now the mistress storyline has swallowed every other headline. From a pure business standpoint, this is a crisis. This is the kind of crisis that requires the champ to be on every friendly platform, cleaning up every narrative, restoring every relationship. Which is exactly why the Claressa Shields camp cannot afford to lose the Breakfast Club right now. Take this to the bank. That is the entire subtext of the segment. Every softened question, every conveniently omitted clip, every reframed timeline. All of it points to a promotional cycle in crisis and a media relationship being called on for damage control. Here's the kicker, the audience isn't buying it. That's the part the Claressa Shields camp didn't calculate. The comment sections on the Breakfast Club's own upload are torched. The Shade Room's repost is torched. Neighborhood Talk's repost is torched. Every clip of the segment currently circulating is being dragged in real time. And the loudest recurring criticism, over and over and over, is that the Breakfast Club is finally being seen for who they are on this particular story. That is the reputational damage. That is the long-tail cost. And that damage does not clean up in one segment or one apology tour. Now let me hit y'all with something else, because this part matters. There is a version of this story where the Breakfast Club could have handled it cleanly. That version looks like this. We know Mz Shyneka. We know Claressa Shields. We know Remy Ma. This situation is bigger than any one interview. We are going to play the clips, ask the honest questions, and let the audience decide. That framing exists. That framing is fair. That framing is journalism. That framing is even, on a busy day, still entertaining. But that is not the framing they chose. They chose the framing that softens the champ, questions the challenger, and buries the wife. And that is why the internet is torching them. Alright, so let's continue toward the wrap, because there's still one piece of this that hasn't been fully unpacked. And that piece is the accountability piece. Charlemagne the God has publicly said, in the same segment we've been talking about, that he likes and respects Mz Shyneka. He said it. On air. So where is that respect when Claressa Shields, on her own live, allegedly body shames Mz Shyneka? Where is that respect when Claressa Shields brings up Mz Shyneka's marriage in a public arena? Where is that respect when Claressa Shields drops an unverified cheating allegation into the record with no receipts attached? Where's that same energy? Because respect that only shows up in the calm moments and vanishes in the crisis moments isn't respect. That is convenience wearing respect's clothes. Here's the kicker. This same pattern of accountability disappearing shows up in how the panel handled the "what about Remy" pivot. When Claressa Shields tried to redirect the mistress question into, well, Remy has a man too, the panel had a golden opportunity to hold the line and say, out loud, let's stay on the actual question. They did not. They let the pivot happen. They let the deflection breathe. They gave the deflection oxygen. And that, right there, is how narratives get flipped on live radio. Not by lying, by allowing the redirect. Now, from what's floating around online, there is one more layer that some viewers are starting to talk about, and I want to raise it carefully because it's speculative. The Whisper Network is saying, and I say saying, that at least part of the reason Lotto is quiet about the ring walk is because Lotto is watching the same storyline the audience is watching. She is watching a promotional partner get dragged in real time. She is watching an incident with Alicia Bombgardner still floating unresolved. She is watching a mistress storyline eat the fight. And she is doing what any smart artist would do. She is minimizing her fingerprint on the association until the smoke clears, which is the exact opposite of the promotional push a fight this size needs 7 days out. That is not a small tell. That is a huge tell. Because when the people you paid to bring the shine start dimming their own light, the promotional building is on fire. And here is another piece the audience has been quietly connecting. The Cris Cyborg factor. Cris Cyborg, one of the most decorated combat athletes on the planet, has been vocal for months about the way Claressa Shields carries herself in and out of the sport. Cris Cyborg has openly questioned whether Claressa Shields is willing to take the actual matchups the sport is asking her to take. And Cris Cyborg has, on more than one platform, hinted that the mistress narrative and the ring narrative are starting to bleed together in a way that damages the entire women's combat sports business. When Cris Cyborg, a woman with nothing personal to gain from the drama, is publicly saying the quiet part out loud, the industry listens. And the Breakfast Club, once again, has chosen not to touch that thread with a 10-foot pole. Why? Because touching that thread means asking Claressa Shields whether her outside-the-ring behavior is starting to overshadow her inside-the-ring greatness. And that is a question the panel is not built to ask right now. Take this to the bank. When Cris Cyborg is louder about your storyline than your own promotional partners are, the promotion has already lost the messaging war. Alright, family, we're heading to the close. Let's put it all together. Claressa Shields walked into a routine interview a few weeks ago and got asked the question the entire audience wanted answered. Instead of handling it with the composure a champion is supposed to bring, she left the studio, opened an Instagram live, and allegedly turned the situation into a full-scale public attack on Mz Shyneka's body, marriage, and career. Mz Shyneka, defending herself, sat down for a follow-up interview to correct the record. The internet responded. Every major blog covered it. The tide turned against Claressa Shields. And in the middle of that tide, the Breakfast Club walked into the studio and delivered a segment that, when you strip away the polish, sounded a whole lot more like a rescue mission than like radio. And Remy Ma sits at home, watching a platform that has praised her, hosted her, and profited from her for over a decade, quietly bend the narrative to protect the very situation that has been circling her marriage. Take this to the bank. There is a line between coverage and coordination. There is a line between commentary and cleanup. There is a line between good radio and paid radio. And this segment sat, uncomfortably, on the wrong side of every single one of those lines. Here's the kicker. The storyline is not going to slow down between now and August 15th. It is going to accelerate. Every day between now and the ring walk, another clip is going to drop, another quote is going to leak, another receipt is going to surface. And by the time Claressa Shields laces up her gloves and walks out to whatever song Lotto reluctantly agrees to perform, the boxing conversation will be a footnote to the personal one. That is the price of this promotional run. That is the reality of what the Crash Out Live cost. And the Breakfast Club, if they are smart, will readdress this segment before the fight. They will bring on Mz Shyneka. They will play the full timeline. They will ask the full question. They will let the audience decide. Because right now, the audience has already decided about them, and the decision is not landing in their favor. So the real question for you, family, is this. Do you believe the Breakfast Club handled this segment with independence? Or do you believe there is a promotional relationship shaping the coverage in the background? Do you believe Mz Shyneka should have had that follow-up conversation face-to-face? Or do you believe she was justified in defending herself publicly the moment the online attack started? And, most importantly, do you believe Remy Ma is going to stay silent on this, the way she has stayed silent for weeks? Or do you believe there is a response coming that is going to detonate the entire situation the moment she opens her mouth? Drop your verdict down below in the comments, and let me know how you're calling it. Because take this to the bank. However this story lands, the story is not close to being finished. Mz Shyneka is not backing down. Claressa Shields is not backing down. Papoose is somehow still nowhere to be found on camera. Lotto is still barely posting. Alicia Bombgardner is still on the outside of MVP promotions. And Remy Ma, the quietest player on the entire board, has the loudest move left to make. If she wants to make it. Stay tuned, family. Because the moment Remy Ma decides to speak and take this to the bank, that moment is coming. Every single person on that couch, every single microphone at iHeartRadio, and every single storyline attached to the August 15th fight is going to feel the shockwave. And when it happens, you are going to want to be here. Follow along. Share this with the group chat that's been arguing about it all week. And drop your call in the comments so the whole room can see where you're standing on the biggest urban entertainment story of the summer. The bell hasn't even rung yet. And Claressa Shields is already down on the cards. Somebody in her camp better call the corner. Because from where the audience is standing, from where the Whisper Network is talking, from where the receipts are stacking, this fight is being lost long before the first jab is thrown. And when the smoke finally clears, the person left standing in the middle of the ring might not be Claressa Shields at all. It might be Mz Shyneka. It might be Remy Ma. It might be the truth.